You're listening to
TheDrewSki Podcast. Alright, so my name is Drew Backhouse. If you don't know me by now, I go by the DJ name of J Ocean. And I just wanted to sit down real quick and make this podcast. For no particular reason, I'd turn that aircon off because it's way too fucking loud, especially with this mic. And I wanted to sort of film a bit of a raw podcast to really express something that I've been going through lately, which I think if I share will maybe help someone else who's maybe going through this or has gone through this for so long in their lives. So I went through a bit of a period where just before it was a bunch of shit that happened that sort of all come together out of my control. And I feel like I was on the right track, but then naturally sort of went downhill. And I think I'm too young to, and I'm not in the position to really persist in those really hard times. And I fell back onto my old habits. I fell back behind everything that I became in the last couple of months. So just to give you a bit of context, my name is Drew, obviously. I'm 21. I was in the mines, as of last September. Since I was 18, I was doing an apprenticeship there as a fitter and turner, and it was always my dream to pursue business and just do something that really excites me, something that I really love, that I really want to chase. I've always been so passionate, and I've always had this driving force, which I can't explain, but I just have it. And I realize now for a long time, growing up through high school and getting up, I had the drive, but I never had the outlet. I never had the thing that I knew I wanted to do, which is why in the last couple of years, the last couple of months, I've pursued music full time. I'm a DJ. I just bought all of this gear, and I'm pursuing a music career, and I want to launch an album, and I want to go on tour, and I want to do all these cool things. And I think it's just a real big outlet of what was already there, this energy that I've had. It's like no matter... Sorry, I'm finding it hard to talk right now. I just ate this biggest thing of sushi you've ever seen. Excuse me. But I just feel like no matter what I've done in life, like I've always had this energy towards it, and I've always been able to just lock in. And like it doesn't matter what it is. Like they can be all different, whether it's a fucking video game, running a 5K race, starting a business and quitting my full-time mining job to pursue that and fund everything, and it worked. It succeeded. And all the way up to music, like it's all just an outlet. And yeah, I really do feel like I get a lot of my energy, and I get a lot of my dreams come alive, like my brain starts working properly when I listen to the right music, which is why there's a bit of a crossover between wanting to do it and make it full time. It's just how it makes me feel, and how I've been able to, when I wasn't doing this shit, how I was able to get through the stuff I was going through in my mining job, where I didn't want to be there and I was depressed, etc. So I look back on that now, and it just makes sense why I would pursue that, because it's something that helped me so much, and all I want as a person is to help other people. And yeah, I feel like I've done a lot of things in my life that I had to do first. I had to do before anyone else had. And I was the outlier. Like I was the person that was sometimes looked down on for these things. And I've come to realize now, especially when I talk to people who are in their 40s, and I can see when I look in their eyes when we have a chat and we talk about wanting to do that thing. It's always been that thing that they barely talk about, that they just wanted to do, but they never did. And I felt like when I was 20 years old and I handed in my 2 weeks notice from my high-paying mining job, where I'd almost finished my training to become fully qualified and I would have moved on, when I handed in my 2 weeks to go and pursue business and music full time, I had this really unexplainable conversation with everyone. It's like the whole time I was there, I was putting on a personality. I was putting on that I was a happy mine worker, like I was a happy apprentice, like I was happy to work there, and all I was doing was copying the people that worked there so that I could fit in. I was never actually being myself. I was never actually Drew when I was there. I was Drew the apprentice, which is it's obviously normal to do that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is when I quit my job and I had this chat with these people and they said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm going to pursue music, I'm going to pursue business. And they looked at me with this look. It was like they wanted to do that. It was like in their life they had these thoughts and they wanted to do it. And there were some people that were really supportive and went, well, I wish you the best. I wish you the most success. There was other people that were like, well, you're stupid. Why would you do that? You're stupid. Why would you give up such a high-paying, secure job to go and pursue something that you have no idea about and something that's probably never going to work? And that is what I thrive in. I thrive in that. When someone projects their fear and they say, how are you gonna make that work? That's where it comes. It's like that fear is like the excitement. It's like, yeah, but when it does work, it's going to feel so much better. It's going to feel so much better when it does work, because I've created something that is seemingly impossible to so many people, and I've created it and I've made it real. I've made it work. And honestly, I'll be completely honest. The shit I'm doing is not fucking rocket science. I'm really not better than anyone else I've ever met. And there are so many people that I've met that are so much smarter than me and are so much more talented and so much more, I can't say driven, and they just don't realize that it's a simple formula of just do. That's it. Just do the thing. That's it. The thing is the hardest part. And, I try and practice extremes. I try and practice doing extreme shit all the time. I randomly packed my bags one day in my mining job and drove to Kosciuszko, which is the highest mountain in Australia, and I summited it in the middle of winter. And the whole point was, what is the most insane thing I can do right now? And it's just there's these things that my family and these people, they have no idea about. And there's all these fears and all these and yeah, I thrive in that. It was hard to explain. And yeah, I look back now and I think personally, one of the reasons why I'm so immersed in this life where I do that stuff, I believe, and I haven't gone to therapy yet, but I feel like it's because when I was in primary school as a young kid, I had really, really bad anxiety. And I was, I had about 30% attendance in primary school. Not a lot of people today, even my oldest mates, know that or remember or care. But you got to realize, when I grew up in constant fear every day, my biggest fear was throwing up. In constant fear every single day. And to make it worse, my mum is such a beautiful person, and she always sheltered that. Always sheltered the fact that I was like that. And in hindsight, as a parent, when I become a parent, I will not be sheltering the kid, because I didn't experience half of what these normal kids experience growing up in primary school. I had so much anxiety to do the most basic shit. A full day at school for me was there's something wrong. Why have I experienced a full day of school? Every single day I was trying to find an escape plan, because and it wasn't that I didn't like school, it was just because I was so scared. I was so scared as a kid. So growing up through high school, you hit puberty, you get to that point where you start experiencing stuff by yourself. And I don't know why. I can't tell you why, but I was just always that outlier. I was always that kid that was on the outside, or I had multiple friend groups. I fit in with everyone, which is a trait my dad has, but I fit in with everyone, and I didn't have a particular group. Like I would go from one end of the spectrum to the other. There was not many kids that did it. Like I could fit in with the gamers and sit there for hours and play iPads or whatever. We used to play this block game, whatever, not Minecraft. And then I'd go and hang out with the popular basketball kids who were the untouchable kids in high school. They were the coolest kids. They were the smartest kids. They were, some of them, they were going places. And I would go like hang out with these kids, and I'd fit in with them, and I'd get to the point where you can actually hang out, but I would never belong. Like I never had a solid friend that I kept through all of high school. I obviously have all my main friends, but I never had that. So I guess that this is transferred over into life when I got my job, because I'm in this one position and I'm so used to reaching out of my comfort zone. I missed a bit of a part where I mentioned growing up through high school, I kept challenging every single thing that I had learned in primary school and why I was so limited. And I challenged every single thing about that because I didn't want to feel trapped anymore. Like I did not want to feel alone anymore. Like I didn't want to feel like I was limited. I didn't want to feel like I had a limit. I didn't want to feel like I had a roof over my head, which is exactly how I felt through all of primary school. So yeah, essentially growing up, I can't tell you where my path veered, but just naturally growing up, that's just how I grew into. I naturally did shit that was so different to everyone else because I was like, no one's doing this. Like, why is no one doing this? And it just got worse and worse and worse throughout high school. And then I graduated and I had no idea, like, I would be the kid, because TikTok blew up around that time when I was graduating. And I watch a lot of TikTok, and you watch a lot of what they call today the LARPers, the people who, driving around these Lambos, and they're like, oh, this is my rich lifestyle, which is a business in itself. It's an identity in itself, which I understand now at 21. But back then, I was like, I want that. Like, I want that. And I looked at the traditional path systems. I looked at university, and I'm grateful for this. But from early on, I knew that if I went to university, I'd be accepted by everyone. But it's not what I wanted to do because, like, very few millionaires have gone to uni. Like, very few millionaires have done that. Their main path is business. So I knew in high school I wanted to start a business. And I did. I started, this is crazy to look back on. I started a motorized bike business. So I would get these motors, and there's a story to that in itself because my parents wouldn't buy me a motorbike. And I really, really wanted a motorbike. Like, all my mates had one. And they were the coolest kids on these big dirt bikes, these big Yamahas and Hondas, zooming up and down the beach. And I had nothing. I had a push bike. And my parents were so scared that they wouldn't buy me a dirt bike because they'd never had dirt bikes growing up, which is fair. So when it come to high school, of course, I challenged that. And I said, well, I can't afford it. And if you're not going to buy me a motorbike, I'm going to build one. So I did. I looked on eBay, and they had these motorized bike kits for sale. And it didn't stop me. I ordered one. I ordered a bike, and I put the motor onto my bike. Now, that is a big story in itself. I snapped the engine bolt, the first one. It took me months to get that thing even working. And then when it worked, it was just fucked. It was so funny. But I look back, and this is the formula for anything that's great, is that you don't know what the fuck is going to happen. You just have a goal. I wanted to have a fucking motorbike, even though that's not even a motorbike. But I wanted to have one, and I envisioned myself not having to pedal around anymore. And so what did I do? Nobody in my area had even ever heard of these. And in my friend group, in my mates at the beach, it was uncool. It was like so weird. And I remember when I built one and I put it on my bike and I showed everyone, the first thing I did was get resented by everyone. Like, why the fuck would you do that? Just get a motorbike. Like, all these things and all this hate I got. But I was happy as fuck. I was on this motorbike cruising around the beach with my fishing rods in the back. I'll try and get a photo. And, you know, I never had to pedal. It was fucking awesome. I loved it. So that is literally the form. Like, now that I think about it, that is literally the formula. Is you don't got to know where you're going to end up, but if you have the idea and you challenge what everyone thinks, you do it. That's just simple. That's just the entrepreneurial mindset. I'm just going to double check that this is still recording. Essentially, what I'm getting at with all this is you really got to give it a crack. And my first business in high school was indeed the motorized bikes, because it was a couple of years after I had built my first one. I never sold them. But what happened was I thought to myself, what sort of business can I make of this? And I had a bit of money laying around. I forgot what from working odd jobs and stuff like that. And I had suggested to a few people, but see, like, my family have never had a business. My friends, obviously, they never had a business. The people at school resented the idea. Like, every single bit of this was just like a fucking mystery to everyone. They were just like, why? But to me, it was just fun. To me, it was like, hold on, I've been riding around on these motorized bikes for months. You telling me I can build one, sell it, and make $300 or $400 on the bike? Like, what the? And I remember the first night that I had purchased 4 bikes and 4 motorized bike kits. And I came home with 4 bikes in the back of my mum's car when I was on my red P plates. And I just remember the face of my dad was just like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, I look back on these moments and they're all pivotal moments. They're all moments that really shaped what I believe today. And yeah, so I built 4 bikes, and that was my first business in high school. And I sold all 4 of them within 2 weeks. And, you know, I think I made $1,000 or $1,200 or something like that off those 4 bikes, total profit. And yeah, that sort of kickstarted everything. So I eventually progressed through high school. I got my first job at Domino's, that was so fun. That was so fun. It's literally just working with your mates, and I was a delivery driver, so we just thrashed that car around Serena. It was so much fun. And, you know, it was, yeah, it sort of progressed into back to the whole graduation thing. What did I want to do after school? I looked around and I said, well, if I go to uni, this is what it's going to look like. People are going to accept me, etc. But my dad was an operator out of the mines. And so I was always hands-on, as you can tell by building the bikes. I was always fixing my own bikes. I was always fixing all the stuff. I always had this general interest in mechanics and all that sort of stuff. So it only felt right when I got offered a fitter and turner apprenticeship at Custom Fluid Power Mackay, where I was able to, it was exactly that. It was hands-on. I had no idea about the trade. I look back on it now, I know so many fitter and turners now, which I wish I talked to before, for good reasons. But I knew nothing about fitting and turning, which is just overall mechanics and machining. So yeah, it was quite interesting. It was quite interesting graduating high school. And then what happened during high school, which is what I'm doing now, is I always, since I got my first car when I was on my learners when I was 16 years old, and then even before that with the mountain bikes, and then it's just how sort of, I guess, mums raised me maybe, is I've always been very, very clean and very OCD. I think that's from a really young age from mum, because she always had to have a perfect kitchen, always had to have a perfect bed, always had to have a perfectly made bed, always had a perfectly vacuum floor. Like all these little things, which that's just mum's comfort. That's just who she is as a person. There's a million people like that. And I guess I grew up with mum mostly. I'm a bit of a mama's boy. And growing up, seeing her doing all this stuff, taking these steps to be clean, I obviously followed in those footsteps, like everything's organised and clean. And when it come to getting my first car, this was an absolute obsession. Like I remember being so curious I remember thinking about a section of my car, maybe in the interior behind the seat, down the bottom where it bolts in. And I'm thinking about all the dirt that's there. Like this weird shit. Like I have this weird, and at the time I didn't realize, but I realize now, I was just listening to the ideas that you get in your head, because everyone has these random thoughts, but maybe not everyone listens to them. So I started doing these weird shit, and of course always keeping my car clean. And yeah, part of growing up, I just realized I loved a feeling of a clean car. Like I loved the feeling of driving. It was like driving a brand new car. It was like the car felt different. The car smelled different, obviously. The car, and it looked different because it was obviously clean. And I had this thing for dirty cars because my dad has never cleaned a car in his entire life. So seeing the difference, I don't know why it reached out to me, but it did. And I felt that difference. And from that day, I did my first detailing job when I was actually probably about 10 years old, and it was cleaning my mum's friend's car. And I look back on it and realized that was my first detailing job. It was $10. But as I got out of high school, I realized that if I love my car so clean all the time, and I have this high standard, and I've taught myself how to do these things properly, because just from watching YouTube and just from realizing that I don't want to scratch my own car, is I could do it for other people. And then I only realized, I guess when I started doing it, started reaching out, that you can actually charge big money for this. You can charge big money for this. And it was quite shocking. I'm just going to check that my camera's recording. Now, during my apprenticeship, I was getting paid $13.50 an hour, which, is pretty standard apprentice wage. So I was on about $650 a week, working 38 hours a week or a little bit more. And I realized that I needed more money because obviously with the trends set from high school, with the TikTok, I'd wanted these fancy things. And I was thinking, my mindset was like, how can I get more money per week, obviously? But we're all just dumb kids. Like, we have no fucking clue. I still don't have a fucking clue. But I realized that little bit of incentive led me to creating the detailing business, which is what I run full time today. And each job is a multi-$1,000 job. And I realized that long before I quit my job. I realized that I didn't belong working for someone else probably in my first year of my apprenticeship. And these were very subtle things. They weren't massive cues, but they were subtle. But I definitely knew for sure. And this moment came, this big pivotal moment came the day that I did my first cut and polishing job, which was I bought this $1,000 polisher and I was obsessed with it. And I got this guy, and I think I charged him like $550 for a full cut and polish, which is unheard of. And it was my first cut and polish job, so I was massively stressed out because you can fuck a car if you don't. Obviously, yeah, if you're polishing the car 3-step cut and polish, you can fuck the car. So this was the first stage of professional stress that I got in my business, because if I fucked this job up, I had to pay for his paint. So this is far beyond now a hobby. This is, I need to get this right. This is like, this is me. This is my responsibility. And it was, yeah, I remember it was on a weekend after my 5 days working during the week. It was on a weekend. And the moment I realized that this pathway was for me, because I charged him those $550, and that was pretty much my weekly wage. That was just a little bit less. And I went to his house, and I remember chucking all my headphones and disappearing in that job. I remember starting that job, and I woke up 8 hours later or 9 hours later, whatever it was, and I was completely gone. Like, I had cut and polished this whole car and done an immense job and done as precision. I did such a good job on that car that I impressed myself so fucking much. I was like, holy fuck. And the owner was ecstatic. $550 for this job was just fucking unheard of in town. It would have been a multi-$1,000 job. So the moment I realised was when I drove out of his house, because that's often, it's like knocking off work. So I'm driving out of his house and I'm driving to the gym, and I had this surge. I still remember this. This is when I was 18. I had this surge of like energy come through me with the music I was playing and with the money that hit my account. I had just created that in one day. I had just convinced someone that I was good enough. It was a bit like imposter syndrome where at my apprenticeship I'm treated like down here because I am. There are people who've been there for 30 years. I'm a first year, which is completely fair. But I had convinced him to let me do that job on his car, and it was hard to explain the feeling, but I knew that feeling was for me. I knew that I wanted to create myself into someone that people could trust with anything, any car, any business model, any idea. And I'll be able to pull through and I'll be able to deliver them a service unheard of. That feeling to me was so encapsulating. It was so immense that I knew that I had to do that. I knew that I had to. It was impossible for me not to. That's how obsessed I was with that feeling. So I continued on 3.5 years later in my trade, just my energy, which I realize now, I could definitely say that the people in my trade were complete assholes. And they definitely were. Not all of them, but they definitely were. But I won't sit here and say that I wasn't someone who was maybe projecting the fact that I didn't want to be there. I definitely love the trade. I'm definitely really good at it. And I had thought about starting my own business in the trade and doing what I do at work for people, getting customers and doing this. So it wasn't the actual work that affected me. I loved it. It was hands-on, used my brain a lot. But it was the people that reminded me that I'm not in charge. And even when I was doing a job, it felt like I was getting so multitasked and I was getting so overwhelmed by this supervision that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it to my highest potential. So what ended up happening was pretty much during the third year of my apprenticeship, about 3.5 years in, I'd switched employers and I was out at the mines working 12.5-hour shifts, working, 8 to 9 days a week sometimes, mainly 5 days, but it just depended on our workload. We never had a set roster because we were contractors. So when the work was on, we were out there working. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that it wasn't good for my work ethic, because we worked long, hard hours, and the tradesmen that I was with had no mercy. They were not pussies. They were there to do a job. Their whole life, their whole focus was there to do a job. And that was so immensely inspiring to me. But unfortunately for them, it was inspiring to my own self to be like that in my own business and to do the stuff that I'd eventually go on to do today, like music and business. So I guess if there's any message that I can send out to someone maybe who's fucking that confused and just has no idea, is that you got to do this shit to find out who you are. And if I would have never done the apprenticeship and just said, I'm going to run my own business at home, I would have failed by now. And I just would have been I would have been some lazy bloke living off Centrelink probably. That's a bit of an overstatement, but you get the point. I would never have become the person that I have become, especially with the mindset and the stuff I've learned, the lessons, the people that I talk to every day, where I've put myself in the position to actually listen to these people who have something to tell you that most people are fucking not trying to hear because they don't want to hear it. But keep yourself open to the fact that in order to get to where you want to be, you have to deal with shit first. You have to go and do that thing that puts you on track, whether you get the income to go follow your dreams, to fund it. You have to go and do that shit first. And you know what? There's even been, in recent times, I'll tell you, there's been recent times where I've thought about going back, like Goggins says, go back to the drawing board, go back to an employer, to somewhere where I'm so uncomfortable and I hate being, just so I can really appreciate what I've got now, where I can work for myself and I am my own boss. I can tell myself what I want to do. But sometimes, because it's been since last September, it's been over 7 months since I quit my job, there's times where I get to where I'm like, fuck, I'd love to be, like, I'd love to have no stress and I'd love to just be employed and just work for an hourly wage and just be able to show up to work and do my best, which is in the trade I was in, was not enough. Do my best and still get paid the same amount every week. But now in business, I realize that if you do that, you will be a complete failure, and your name is your business. It rests upon that. And if you get one job where you fuck up, so if I scratch someone's car or something like that, everyone will talk about it and no one will go to you. So yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. Sometimes I miss the social aspect. Not that I, from high school all the way into my trade, I was still an outlier. Like, I had friends that were my age, and I had friends that we had similarities and stuff like that. But all the other people, I was just a complete outlier. Completely, like, people would just not talk to me because I wouldn't be able to talk about the shit that they liked. That sounds bad. Let me reword that. I wouldn't care about the stuff that they liked. There was a lot about drinking, partying, smoking, telling stories about that. I didn't give a fuck about that. I didn't give a fuck about drinking. I didn't give a fuck about doing drugs. I don't care. I just wanted to talk about the stuff that I was doing outside of work, chasing my dreams, making music, all this stuff. And nobody wanted to hear it. And yeah, for so long, it was such a hard feeling. But now I look back and it was like all this stuff is necessary to find out where you're going. Like, all of this stuff is so necessary. And if I never had experienced that resistance from other people, then I wouldn't appreciate where I am today. If I never would have went through those hard times and experienced those things that I had to be grateful for in the moment, because I'm just thankful to be able to do what I do. So I know I'm going to have people that are going to go against it, and they're going to argue and they're going to speak negatively. And all you got to do is you got to simply block it out. You can't listen to it. If you listen to that shit, if you become what everyone tells you, then what are you? You're not yourself. And if you don't even know who you are when you get tested, or when you get an opportunity to do what you want to do and be who you are, you're going to fail and you're going to miss it. So you need to know who you are and what you love and what you do. But anyway, I haven't even named this podcast yet, but I'm going to make this podcast because why not? And I'm going to make it work. And in a couple of years' time, I want to do really well. So yeah, thank you for listening. Let's do it again sometime.
You're listening to the Drewski Podcast.
I forget I have blonde hair. I did this yesterday.